Alright, let's talk about Pyro characters in Genshin Impact. If you've been playing for a while, you already know that not all elements are created equal. And let's be real, Pyro is one of the best when it comes to combat. It hits hard, has some of the best reactions, and let's not forget, it's one of the most stacked elements in the entire game. Seriously, if you don't have at least one Pyro character built, what are you even doing? But with so many Pyro characters out there, how do you know which ones are actually worth investing in? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going through every Pyro character in Genshin Impact, ranking them based on power, versatility, and just how fun they are to play. Whether you're looking for your next main DPS, or just want to know if your favorite Pyro unit holds up, stick around. This is gonna be good. I'm quickly moving on to the video. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching! Xinyan, the rock star of Liyue, who unfortunately never got her time to shine. On paper, she's got everything. A cool design, a fun personality, and even one of the best backstories in Genshin Impact. But when it comes to her actual gameplay, it's like Hoyoverse couldn't decide what they wanted her to do. Some of her abilities scale on def, others on ATK, and her kit is split between pyro damage and physical damage buffs. The end result? A character that feels like she's constantly fighting against herself rather than actually helping your team. The biggest problem with Xinyan is that she doesn't excel at anything. Her shield? Not strong enough to be a reliable tank. Her pyro damage? Outclassed by literally every other pyro unit. And if you were hoping she'd be a solid physical DPS buffer, well, let's just say you'd be better off using someone like Rosaria or even a standard Bennett setup. Her damage output is inconsistent, her scaling is all over the place, and she just doesn't fit into any proper team comp without feeling like a wasted slot. And the worst part? She's been like this since launch. Hoyoverse hasn't given her a proper buff or even a decent support unit to help her shine. Meanwhile, other characters with weird kits, like some of the Dendro units, have been saved by elemental reactions or new mechanics. But poor Xinyan? She's just stuck in limbo. Forever the character that could have been great but never quite got there. Amber is one of those characters that every Genshin Impact player has a soft spot for, even if they never actually use her. She's your first Pyro archer, your first free character, and let's be real, your first disappointment when you realize her damage just isn't cutting it. Her elemental skill, Baron Bunny, is great for distracting enemies, but it doesn't pack much of a punch. And while her burst does deal some pyro damage, the scaling is so low that it feels more like a sparkler than an explosion. That being said, Amber does have her moments. If you're new to the game, she's actually one of the best characters for exploration. Her passive reduces stamina consumption while gliding, making her perfect for traversing Mondstadt's massive landscapes. Plus, if you ever find yourself in desperate need of a fire source, whether it's lighting torches, breaking cryo shields, or setting hilichurl camps ablaze, Amber's always there to lend a hand. Just don't expect her to carry you through Spiral Abyss anytime soon. At the end of the day, Amber is a classic case of a character that could have been great, but got the short end of the stick. She's fun, she's iconic, and she's part of every traveler's journey. But she's also one of the first units you'll bench once you start pulling stronger Pyro characters. Maybe one day, Hoyoverse will give her a much-needed buff. Until then, she'll always be Mondstadt's best outrider, at least in spirit. Alright, let's talk about Thoma in Genshin Impact and whether he's worth adding to your team. He's a polearm user from Inazuma, and while he might not be the first name that comes to mind when you think of top-tier characters, he does bring something unique to the table. His main gimmick? Shields. But not just any shields. Thoma's Elemental Burst sets up a regenerating shield that refreshes every time your active character lands a normal attack. On top of that, it also applies Pyro to enemies, making him a solid choice for certain reaction-based teams. Now, before you get too excited, let's be real. Thoma's damage is pretty underwhelming. He's not a DPS, and while his Pyro application is decent, it's not exactly game-changing. If you're running a reverse vaporize or reverse melt setup, he can contribute, but he won't be carrying the team. The issue is that there are just better shielders out there. Characters like Zhongli provide stronger, more consistent shields, while others like Xiangling or Bennett offer way more utility for Pyro-based teams. That being said, Thoma isn't a bad character, he's just situational. If you're early in the game or missing key supports, he can definitely hold his own. He works well in certain teams and adds a layer of survivability, especially in long fights. But if you pull stronger support characters, he'll likely get benched. So, if you like his design or just want to experiment with Pyro shields, go for it. Otherwise, you might find yourself swapping him out pretty quickly. Alright, let's talk about Yanfei, one of the best 4-star Pyro DPS characters in Genshin Impact. If you're looking for a lawyer who can argue her way to victory, literally, Yanfei is your girl. As a Catalyst user from Liyue, she brings a unique playstyle that revolves around stacking sacred seals and unleashing powerful charged attacks. The best part? She's super F2P friendly, meaning you don't need 5-star weapons or crazy artifacts to make her work. But fair warning, getting used to her kit takes a bit of practice, especially when managing her stamina. Now, where Yanfei really starts to shine is with her constellations. Since she's a 4-star character, getting dupes isn't a nightmare, and trust me, it's worth it. Her C1 reduces stamina consumption, making those charged attacks way smoother, and by the time you hit C4, her damage output becomes way more consistent. But the real game changer? C6. This one gives her a shield that scales off her max HP, adding much-needed survivability to her glass cannon nature. If you're planning to use Yanfei for endgame content like Spiral Abyss, having a few constellations on her will make a world of difference. So should you invest in Yanfei? Absolutely, if you're in need of a solid Pyro DPS that doesn't rely on 5-star luck. She's easy to build, gets better with constellations, and her gameplay is a fun mix of strategy and high damage bursts. Plus, who doesn't love the idea of a lawyer who can literally burn her enemies in court? If you haven't given her a shot yet, now might be the perfect time to do so. Dehya was one of those characters everyone was waiting for after her reveal in Sumeru. Her design is stunning, and she has that aura of strength and elegance that made fans really excited. But once she finally hit the game, the excitement quickly faded. Why? Well, let's just say her kit didn't quite live up to the hype. Sure, she's a Pyro character, and her elemental skill is supposed to make her this off-field Pyro applicator. But when you dig into the details, you'll see why she didn't make as big of a splash as expected. Dehya is supposed to be a tank, right? She can mitigate damage for your active character using her elemental burst, but it's not as effective as you'd hope. You're better off using a dedicated shield character, which makes her tanking role feel a bit redundant. And then there's her turret. It's neat, but it only deals damage every 2.5 seconds, which feels like a long time when you're trying to keep up the pressure in a fast-paced fight. For a character that's supposed to be dealing consistent damage, that's a bit of a letdown. At the end of the day, while Dehya has potential and her design is still top tier, her gameplay feels a bit lackluster compared to what many players expected. If you're after a solid Pyro support or tank, you'll probably want to look at other characters who fill those roles a bit more effectively. But hey, if you love Dehya for her style and vibe, you might still have fun with her. She's not the worst, but she's definitely not the best either. It's just a bit of a missed opportunity. Diluc has always been a fan favorite in Genshin Impact, especially when the game first launched. His cool factor was off the charts, and players couldn't wait to get their hands on him. Armed with a claymore and an explosive set of abilities, he quickly became one of the most sought-after standard 5-star characters. His elemental abilities let him deal solid damage in close-range combat, and for a while he was a powerhouse, dominating the battlefield with fiery attacks. But over time, players started noticing some issues with his kit that started to make him less of a must-have for endgame content. One of the major downsides to Diluc's abilities is the pushback effect on his elemental burst. While it may look impressive when enemies are blasted back, in practice, it's a bit of a pain. If you're fighting multiple enemies or trying to dish out consistent damage, this pushback can become a real hindrance. You have to run back to your target, which can interrupt your flow and delay your damage output. It's especially frustrating when you're trying to maintain your rhythm in more intense fights. That said, Diluc is still a viable option for clearing endgame content, but only if you're willing to put in the time and resources to make him shine. If you've got the right artifacts, weapons, and plenty of ascension levels, he can still dish out some impressive damage. His potential may not be as game-breaking as some other characters, but if you enjoy his playstyle and can work around those small hiccups, Diluc remains a solid choice. Klee is one of those characters who definitely made a splash when she first dropped in Genshin Impact. A limited-time Pyro character from Mondstadt, she quickly won over players not just with her explosive abilities, but with her adorable, fiery personality. Honestly, who can resist a character who's both super cute and capable of dropping bombs on the battlefield? She's been featured in multiple events and even had some major storylines centered around her mysterious mom, which adds to her charm. There's definitely more to Klee than meets the eye. However, when it comes to her actual gameplay, Klee starts to show a few cracks. Sure, her damage output is decent, especially if you get her maxed out and invested in properly, but her kit can feel a bit clunky over time. She's a lot of fun when you first pick her up, but as you get deeper into the game, you might notice that her skills can become a little more awkward to use than you'd expect. Klee's playstyle is all about launching those bombs, but the timing and positioning aren't always as smooth as you'd like. If you're considering using Klee, just be prepared to put in some serious effort to make her shine. She's definitely not the kind of character you can just throw into any team and expect fireworks without a bit of investment. You'll need to sink some resources into her talents and artifacts if you want to see the full potential of her pyro explosions. But for players who enjoy her character and her playstyle, she's definitely worth the effort. Just don't expect her to be the easiest character to build. Yoimiya is a character who's impossible to forget. Hailing from the bustling Naganohara fireworks shop in Inazuma, she's got an explosive personality that matches her fiery fighting style. When you first meet her in the main story, you'll quickly see that Yoimiya is all about big, bold explosions. Literally. Her cheerful nature might make her seem carefree, but don't let that fool you. When it comes to Pyro DPS, she's a force to be reckoned with. Her elemental skill is where things get interesting. With it, Yoimiya's normal attacks get infused with Pyro, and she can deal a ton of damage with each shot. The best part? Her attacks get a massive damage boost, making her an absolute powerhouse when she's on the field. And even when her skill is on cooldown, Yoimiya isn't just waiting around. She can still support your team, making her not only a great DPS, but also a solid asset for any group. In terms of team synergy, Yoimiya's ability to boost her damage and support others makes her one of the best Pyro characters in Genshin Impact. She's perfect for dealing with enemies that require heavy damage output, and her ability to fit into different team setups means you're never too far from an explosive performance. If you're looking for a character who brings both style and power to the table, Yoimiya should definitely be on your radar. Chevreuse is a breath of fresh air in Genshin Impact, especially for those who love unique character kits. As the first 4-star Pyro character from Fontaine, she was released alongside an event that really put her in the spotlight. And honestly, she deserves the attention. What makes her stand out is her ability to bring back a somewhat forgotten mechanic, overload reactions. While many characters rely on more common elements like vaporize or melt, Chevreuse focuses on Pyro and Electro synergy, giving players a whole new way to approach combat. What really makes Chevreuse shine is her first passive ability. Not only does it provide a small healing boost for your active character, but it also buffs the overload reaction by reducing the enemy's Pyro and Electro resistance. This means that when you're running a team with both Electro and Pyro characters, you'll see some serious damage boosts, especially when you're targeting high-resistance enemies. Sure, it does require a bit of a niche setup, but for those who love the overload playstyle, it's totally worth it. Now, you might think that a niche setup like this wouldn't be too impactful in the endgame, but Chevreuse actually holds her own quite well. With the right team composition, she can be a game changer in those higher-level fights. The ability to consistently trigger overload reactions while keeping your characters healed up makes her an incredible asset for anyone looking to push through tougher content. So, if you're into experimenting with different playstyles and love a bit of synergy between elements, Chevreuse might just be the character you didn't know you needed. When it comes to maximizing damage potential in Genshin Impact, Hoyoverse has been consistently delivering some of the most unique kits, especially for Pyro characters, and Gaming is a shining example of that. His kit revolves around a devastating plunge attack that packs a punch, but here's the twist. It only triggers if you hit a character or wall with his skill. This might sound tricky at first, but with the right setup, you can spam this plunge attack during his ultimate for some insane damage. Now, if you're planning to make the most of Gaming, you'll need to rely on a few specific supports to boost his potential. If you have Bennett's final constellation unlocked, things get even better. This can take Gaming's damage to new heights, especially when paired with off-field Hydro characters like Furina. This combination allows you to trigger the Vaporize reaction consistently, bringing out the absolute best in Gaming's Pyro abilities. But don't forget, gaming isn't invincible. You'll definitely want a dedicated healer in the team to keep him going since he'll be dealing a lot of damage at the cost of his own health. So, to wrap it up, gaming is an absolute beast when used correctly, and if you're willing to invest in those necessary supports, he can clear content with ease. Just be sure to pay attention to his team composition, and you'll see him shine as a top-tier Pyro unit in your squad. When it comes to Genshin Impact, few characters are as universally loved and highly regarded as Bennett. Known for his tragic lore as one of the unluckiest characters in the game, Bennett somehow still manages to be an absolute powerhouse in combat. The community has even coined him the 6-star character, and trust me, it's not without reason. What really makes Bennett stand out is his elemental burst, an ability that can turn the tide of any battle. He creates a field that not only heals your active character, but also provides a huge ATK boost. It's basically like giving your DPS a massive power-up, and that's where Bennett truly shines. But it's not just about healing or raw damage buffs. Bennett's versatility comes into play when you think about how he can work with any DPS character. Whether you're running a fast-paced Pyro build, or mixing him into your favorite team composition, his burst ability will always add value. Even if your main damage dealer focuses on scaling with something like DEF or HP, Bennett's support still provides great utility, though it doesn't quite boost their damage as much as someone scaling off ATK. That being said, while Bennett is often seen as a jack of all trades, he's still a master of one thing: boosting your DPS. You could be playing a different character, focusing on elemental reactions or raw power, and Bennett will just make things a little bit better. His flexibility in teams, ability to support any main DPS, and sheer utility make him a must-have for nearly every roster. So, if you ever find yourself needing a reliable support to increase your damage and keep your characters topped off, Bennett's your guy. If you're looking for an all-around powerhouse in Genshin Impact, look no further than Xiangling. She's one of those rare characters who can literally do it all. Whether you need a main DPS, sub-DPS, or support, Xiangling has you covered. The best part? She's not hard to build up, and once you invest a little into her, she'll be right there with you, doing damage and supporting your team at the same time. What makes her even better is that nearly every polearm released fits perfectly into her playstyle, making her a top choice for any player looking to maximize their team's potential. Now, let's talk about her constellations. If you manage to unlock some of them, you're in for some major upgrades. Her C1, for example, boosts her ability to deal damage significantly, while other constellations bring extra buffs that improve her overall performance. This makes Xiangling not just a free character you can get through the Spiral Abyss, but also one that grows more powerful as you put in the effort. She's the kind of character who doesn't just stay good, she gets better the more you work with her, and those buffs are a game changer. To top it all off, Xiangling is one of those characters you can count on in a variety of situations. She doesn't need to be perfectly optimized to be useful, and with her kit, she's fantastic for triggering reactions. Whether you're tackling high-tier content or just having fun exploring, Xiangling brings solid utility and versatility to your team. If you're someone who enjoys mixing up strategies and keeping things dynamic, Xiangling will absolutely be your best friend in the game. Laini is a fascinating character in Genshin Impact, a 5-star Pyro archer hailing from the dazzling region of Fontaine. While Pyro might not always be the easiest element to master, especially with a bow user, Laini brings a lot to the table, and trust me, he makes it work. His charged attacks are where the magic happens, dealing solid damage once you can pull them off. It's not the easiest to land those shots, but with his kit, Laini helps make this process a bit more forgiving. One of the key aspects of Laini's abilities is his elemental skill. He summons a charming hat on the battlefield, which actively taunts enemies and draws their attention. It's a nice touch, especially for a Pyro character who's typically at the back of the battlefield. This skill not only gives you some breathing room, but also provides a nice synergy with his overall playstyle, letting you focus on dealing damage while the hat distracts the enemies. Then there's his unique HP mechanic. Laini has the ability to both take away and regenerate his own HP, which can be a bit tricky, but also quite powerful when used right. That's why the Marechaussee artifact set fits him so well, allowing you to leverage his HP management for extra boosts in combat. With these features, Laini stands as one of the top Pyro characters in the game, landing himself comfortably in the 3rd spot. He's a bit tricky to master, but once you get the hang of him, he can be an absolute powerhouse in your roster. Hu Tao is one of the most powerful characters in Genshin Impact, and if you've got her on your team, you're in for a treat. As the director of the Wangsheng Funeral Parlor, Hu Tao has a unique playstyle that's all about balancing risk and reward. Her damage output relies heavily on her HP, which means she can deal massive blows when she's at lower health. The real magic happens when you activate her elemental skill, which boosts her charged attacks, making her one of the best DPS characters for single target damage. No wonder she's been crowned the best Pyro character for such a long time. Now, while she shares some similarities with characters like Liney, there's no denying that Hu Tao takes the crown in terms of raw damage. Her kit just works so well when you combine it with Hydro Resonance and the Vaporize reaction. If you're looking to take down bosses or tough enemies quickly, Hu Tao is your go-to girl. Her ability to melt through single-target foes makes her an absolute beast in those situations. Seriously, once you get her on your account, you'll find yourself breezing through content that isn't immune to Pyro. The best part? Hu Tao doesn't need a whole lot of fancy gear to shine. With the right artifacts and a bit of strategy, you'll be able to unlock her full potential. She's a high-risk, high-reward character who rewards players who know how to manage her HP and elemental abilities. If you're a fan of explosive damage and precision in your playstyle, Hu Tao will definitely become one of your favorite characters to use. Arlecchino, a powerhouse from Snezhnaya, has been making waves in Genshin Impact ever since her introduction in the Fontaine story. If you were paying attention during her debut, it was clear that she was going to be one of the most impactful characters in the game, not just in terms of lore, but also when it comes to her in-game abilities. When Arlecchino dropped in the version 4.6 update, she quickly proved herself to be a game-changer, especially with her unique ability tied to the Bond of Life mechanic. For those of you who don't know, the Bond of Life mechanic was already floating around in the game before Arlecchino's arrival. But what makes her so special is that she's the first playable character to fully tap into its potential. This mechanic allows her to deal massive damage when used correctly, and if you master it, you could be looking at regular hits over 100,000 damage. That's right, over 100k with Arlecchino. This ability puts her above even some of the top-tier Pyro characters, especially when you're facing off against multiple enemies. What makes Arlecchino even more exciting is how versatile she is in combat. Her polearm is fast, her abilities hit hard, and when you factor in the Bond of Life mechanic, she becomes a force to be reckoned with. Whether you're tackling bosses or clearing out mobs, Arlecchino's damage potential is absolutely through the roof. If you've got her on your team, you're in for a wild ride as she can obliterate enemies in the blink of an eye, proving just how powerful Dendro characters can be when they really get going. Alright, let's talk about one of the most exciting new additions to Genshin Impact, Mavuika, the Pyro Archon with a Claymore. For those of you who've been around for a while, you know Claymore characters haven't been getting much love lately. Sure, there are some standouts like Gaming and Kinnich, but now we've got Mavuika, and trust me, she's worth the hype. If you're into Pyro damage, she's your new go-to powerhouse. With the right setup, her burst can easily hit over 1,000,000 damage. Yes, you heard that right, over 1,000,000. That's some serious firepower right there. But it gets even better. Mavuika's not just about that big burst number. When you pop her ultimate, you don't just get the insane damage, you also get a solid window of time where you can dish out high basic attack damage. This means you're not just relying on her burst for big hits, her regular attacks are going to be packing a punch too. And the cherry on top? Even when she's not on the field, she's still doing work. You'll get a little ring left behind by your active character that deals consistent Pyro damage. Talk about a passive damage machine. So yeah, Mavuika might just be the game changer you've been waiting for. With her ability to dish out massive numbers while offering solid off-field damage, she's a great pick for those looking to take their Pyro team to the next level. If you've got her on your roster, you're in for some serious firepower and fun gameplay. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.